Alright everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do a Temple of Jade Serpent 19 on Fortified. The other affixes are Sanguine, Volcanic, and of course Thundering, because we're in the Thundering season. So for this pool, since it's Fortified, I started off with a double pool here. I grabbed this Elemental dude, and then there's also a caster that needs to be interrupted. He does an ability called Tidal Burst. The Elemental has an ability, I forget what it's called, but it's uninterruptible and you can't stun him. The only way to avoid the damage is to LOS, common mechanic in this season. So what I'm doing is I'm positioning him in a place to where you can LOS his damage. I'm going to do the same thing here, a little bit too slow. If you can see, fortunately I have a rogue, so he's able to take on some of that aggro. But they went kind of going ham on the ads. If I could have done that again, I probably would have gotten aggro on the ads first and then pulled the big dude. But it worked out okay because nobody died. It tends to be with warriors, they tend to take tons of aggro, which is why I have those that rogue there to help me trick some of the aggro, so he can help me hold aggro on a lot of the guys when I'm like moving all over. Sanguine, it's especially useful to have tricks or misdirect because a lot of times it's difficult to keep aggro when you're kiting everything around because you know you're not hitting it. And when you have a warrior or pally or red pally who do a lot of damage up front and they're standing right in front of the boss, so the boss literally just has to turn and melee them, it's important to get a lot of aggro on this dungeon especially. So here we have the fallen water speaker. He again needs to be interrupted. Now this next pool, what I did kind of worked sorta, but if you want to play it a bit safer, if you're on a real like high prog key, you can either trap or imprison or CC the guy on the left or on the right. I mean, usually the left I would recommend, but I would imprison him and then I would pull everybody over to the side so that we only have one interrupt to deal with. These guys, we have a rogue and a warrior, so and also a shaman healer. So we have a lot of interrupts going out. This is a really good interrupt comp. Only one who's kind of weak on the interrupts is the priest, but even still, a priest can solo interrupt a water speaker. So it's not really too big of an issue. They have a single target cast that they cast more often, and then something called Tidal Burst, which definitely needs to be interrupted. It can totally one-shot your whole group on a higher key. You can see that I'm positioning the elemental, or trying to position the elemental, so that they have the option of LOSing. At this point, our healer was actually really strong on this run, stronger than I anticipated. It's my friend Toli, he's in my guild, and he was able to kind of like keep us up straight through all of these tainted bursts, I think they're called, and which is what the elementals do. And we didn't even really go down in health, except for Cypher did die actually, so I guess that counts. So here we're coming up on the boss. This is on Fort, so you just got to make sure you interrupt him. If you can see, because we're a high melee group with lots of interrupts and a shaman, which is the best interrupting healer, we're able to get almost every single one of these casts that he does. So this group is super optimized for a fight with this guy. And oh, that's embarrassing. You saw there I just took the frontal. Somehow I lived, which is not going to normally happen. But yeah, be careful if you're a tank, don't take the frontal. It seems pretty obvious, but you know, I make mistakes. But anyway, moving on, we're going to get a lot of these interrupts on these guys. So and oh, we missed one there, so you could saw it hit the rogue pretty bad, and he's still kicking. But if we do those interrupts, it also allows for the healer to do some damage. You can see the healer's up at 20 something. He just passed me and on tanking in DPS. So if you have a healer that can do some damage, it's always good to make it so you take less damage. Always makes the run go faster. The healer, especially a shaman, they tend to do some damage themselves. So this boss goes pretty good. I think you get the idea, so I'm going to fast forward a bit from here. Okay, so killed the first boss, coming up on the first hunted Shaw here. These guys, if not dealt with, can totally wipe you. They have an AoE fear that has a huge range. have tried to LOS it. It doesn't even really seem to work to LOS it, so you just got to interrupt him. The first ability they catch, I'm assuming it does damage. The damage is so low or whatever, it's not even detectable. But the fear, that is an interruptible cast, and that 100% needs to be interrupted. That is the highest priority interrupt in the dungeon. You can see there, which I don't like, it looks like the rogue pulled the Sha over for me. In general, I just don't, unless you're on disc with me or like we run together a lot, don't pull for the tank pretty much ever, because you can see there I almost died because I wasn't ready to take the damage. I didn't have the defensives to both get aggro and take the damage from the two big panda guys. These guys chunk pretty hard, and in general, just don't pull for your tanks unless they say to. Like, that's pretty much 101. They could have wiped the group there by doing that. And also, the tank can just, he'll pull them when he's ready. Like, the tanks are waiting for their cooldown, so just don't do that. Don't do what that rogue did right there. So we got the talking fish and the Sha here. I am just pulling the fish because he has a sleep that he casts that's interruptible. And in general, I just try to avoid creating situations where I have to depend on the pugs to do the interrupts. One thing that you'll notice about my videos is that I'm almost always going with either all pugs or mostly pugs. Two of the people in this group happen to be my friends, but we're still not highly coordinated. We're not in disc, and we don't run together all the time, especially Toli. I only run with him sometimes, even though he's in my guild. But, you know, if you're super coordinated, you can do bigger pools. That's the bottom line. But the vast majority of players, we're not really doing that. Oh shoot, you can see I died there. Again, that was a issue with pulling. They pulled the bird. I was just gonna pull the Sha at first and DPS him for a little bit until he did his first cast, and I had more of my cooldowns back, and that's not what happened. So, you know, it's very important that tanks are able to time their mitigations, and if you just spring pools on them, it's a lot of times it's a life and death difference. Like, if I don't have the proper mitigation for a given guy, or I'm not prepared to kite or take aggro, because you have to take a lot of aggro before you kite, then you can really wipe us. That bird has a tank buster that he smacked me in the face with, and that's why I died. Fortunately, that didn't really slow the group down too much because they're able to kite the bird. The bird outside of his tank buster doesn't do a lot of damage, so he's very easy to kite. It's just that I wasn't really ready for it. If I was a better tank, I'd probably have been able to deal with it though, but, you know, in general, just don't pull for your tank. So this got a little hairy too. They did a little bit more damage than I expected, so I had to go pop my meta and run out, but it worked out. So what I'm doing here, and a lot of pugs don't do this, but if you go down and you start hitting this scroll on the tank, it's a good way to get everybody down to the bottom, and also you can pull them in. The one thing you want to be careful doing here on a Sanguine week is dropping a puddle over that little scroll because that'll really like make the run go a lot longer. So I mean, that probably sounds pretty obvious, but you don't want to do that. Okay, so this boss coming up here is probably one of the easiest bosses in the game right now for Mythic Plus. I have literally never wiped on this boss to my memory. There are lots of bosses in here I've wiped on. In fact, I would say the last two are two of the hardest bosses in Mythic Plus, because they have very specific mechanics that are very healer intense. But this boss here is not the case. Basically, what you have to do is you switch on 7 stacks. I usually tell my groups to start with the left guy, and then after 7 stacks of whatever that little red debuff is, then you go ahead and switch to the other one. And if you just do that, it'll keep going. Even if he's just about to die, I would still say go ahead and do the switch, because you're going to end up hitting him too much, and what happens is if you hit him past the 7 stack mark, they create a big shield, and then they become undamageable for a long period of time. But the mechanic is really, really simple, and as long as you do the 7 stack switch, you'll pretty much always move back to him by the time he's ready to be hit again. Switch on 7, 3, 4. We do have Lust up, but we didn't use it. I would normally use Lust here, but I didn't really remember to mention it. Sometimes if you're going a little bit fast, you won't have a Lust on this pool. So I would just go ahead and use it on the Shambler in the next pool because I want my Lust back up for Shaw. The final boss, the Shaw at the end, he actually is a very long fight. So you can actually like just get a quicker fight, and he has better phases for damaging, so it speeds up the run more to do it on the last boss. Sometimes when you're trying to push keys for time, it's not so much about creating the easiest route, the one that's the safest. It's more about the ones that's the fastest. So anytime you can have a situation where you can speed up just basically a patchwork fight, a fight where you just do a ton of damage, like a Shambler on Fortified, then it's always a good idea to use your Lust there. So if you are kind of progging in this content, if you're on Tyrannical, I would probably recommend lusting on the first and third boss, because the third boss tends to kill the most groups because of the healing mechanic, and you want to make that phase, the second phase of the boss, as short as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and go forward a bit. I do want to mention the Shaw of Doubt. We're coming up on a group with a Shaw of Doubt here, and a Shaw of Doubt is very crazy. You can see here my shaman, my friend, told me, hey, let's do a double pull here, and I was super hesitant. You saw in chat, I'm scared, and I went ahead and did it, and it was definitely a mistake. The Shaw of Doubt on Fort, even on this 19 key, can technically one-shot me, so you can see how I just melted there. And then if you combine the Shambler with that and having to hold aggro off of everybody, it was just a bad move. In general, when it comes to Fort, when you're in prog keys, my recommendation would be to do almost entirely single pulls. There's only a couple places I do double pulls in here. One being when I have a Lust at the first pull, and the second being when I pull the Shaw with the two big pandas, or I pull the Shaw with the Hunting Shaw. Hunting Shaws don't do a ton of damage as long as they're interrupted, and as long as you can get their interrupts, Hunting Shaws are not too big of a problem. But in general, I'd say when you're pushing high keys and it's a little bit higher than you're used to, unless your interrupts are very organized and dependable, I would pretty much try to almost always avoid doing double pulls, especially when you're just getting a feel for it. You'll know what pulls you can handle and which ones you can't. And this definitely was not an efficient route to take. I think we ended up letting it reset, yeah, because I couldn't take them for that long. That Shaw of Doubt, man, he hurts. He hurts a lot. He'll kick your tank's butt. You can technically stun him, but it's very hard to time it because his cast is very fast on his tank buster. It's gonna cost us the key if we don't pull it together really quick here. Okay, so we're here at the Jade Serpent boss. This one kills a lot of groups. Now, the mechanic with this boss is he drops a dot on you in the first phase, and the dot is magical. It's fire. But what happens in the second phase, when he gets around 65% health or something, he switches into a poison damage phase, and this is no longer considered magical. It's considered poison. So as a tank, for me, I use Demon Spikes. Demon Spikes can mitigate the poison damage because it's physical, but they can't mitigate the magic damage. The magic damage is somewhat negligible, but this poison damage here that he's doing right now is one of the most intense single target tank. If not, it's probably the most intense single target healing of all Mythic Plus because you can't just simply dispel it. You can see I'm taking some damage. I'm even kind of sort of kiting a little bit, but we got through the phase there. I'm still alive. That rogue almost died. The priest right there just ran right in behind me. Fortunately, moved fast enough to not get frontaled. Now you can dodge these frontals as a tank. As long as you don't just stand in them, it's not too bad. But if you take a little bit, you can see it didn't even really lower my health. But if you stand there, it will kill you. So you just have to kind of get out of the way. It's pretty easy after that. But that one phase in the middle is honestly one of the hardest tank mechanics in Mythic Plus. I would say Jade Serpent is arguably the most difficult dungeon in the game right now. You could probably make a case for some of the others, but I would say Jade is probably the most difficult. Some people might say Vault, but I think Vault is just difficult because it doesn't have a lot of gear that drops, so people don't really farm it that are well above the eye level necessary to do it. Where Jade, it has a lot of great gear, and it has a gun, so you see lots of hunters in there. It's got some of the best trinkets. It's got the best haste trinket, the one that I use on that I'm actually using on my character right now, and it's got a lot of good stuff in there. So it's a commonly run dungeon. It's also short. It's one of the shorter dungeons other than Ruby Life Pools. It's probably the shortest dungeon this season. So it's a very desirable dungeon to just farm and get honor and get gear. And it also has a lot of the leather and like pieces that have procs and stuff for sockets and all that. So people just like this dungeon a lot. This pool is pretty straightforward. Not really much to say about here. So I'm gonna go forward to the next pool here.
Too far away. I need to get closer.
Watch your feet.
Okay, this pool has 2 water speakers, so they can be a little bit crazy. They have, again, that ability Tidal Burst that I talked about in the beginning, and you got to make sure you interrupt that. They also have an ability called Hydrolance, which I also mentioned, but it's not as kill you in 1 second type of thing, but Tidal Burst needs to be interrupted, so we just always got to interrupt Tidal Burst. You can see I'm trying to pull them back a little bit away out of their Sanguine there and then clear my stack. That wasn't too bad of an issue. And now we're coming up to maybe the hardest ad pool in Mythic Plus in the entire game. It's very difficult. We have a skull on the Shah, and you can see I'm waiting. I didn't pull right away because I was waiting for some of my cooldowns to be up. I needed to have my Fell Devastation there to make sure I could get aggro on all of the mobs. I also jumped in. In here, some things to watch out for. The Shaws of Doubt are really the big problem here. A lot of people will trap. I didn't really feel like we needed to trap with this group, but they will trap 1 or 2 of the Shaws of Doubt, and then they'll fight them normally. And see, since I had my Fell Devastation up there, I was able to kite for a little bit in between my Demon Spike cooldown, and I was able to mitigate some of the damage there. This actually went really well. This is about as good as you can expect this pull to go on Fort on a high key. But yeah, I'm just kind of kiting them back. And what will happen now is people will res, and then they can just jump back into the fight like they're battle resed. So if you are tanking, you do have to watch out for the Shambler's little ads that spawn. They will pop out and kill everybody. So all in all, this pool went really great, and I was really stoked that it did go so well.
My heart is hurting a little. Looks like
I still have a 20 key I have to do for this that I got from doing this dungeon. So we're coming up on the Shah here. The healer, it's just really important to dispel, and that can be really difficult, especially for a Mistweaver. The shaman has a bit more tools, and also we have a shadow priest who can do a mass dispel. So we have a couple things to keep those dispellable dots off of us, but it's still a difficult fight. You can see if you look at the health, the raid frames, that there are not a lot of dot. Like the dot gets cured there, like there it is. See, and it just gets knocked off pretty fast because of our comp. So that was intentional. And the other thing that I want to mention is you see that X right there. When you go into the down phase or the second phase or whatever you want to call it, you spawn an ad, which is a mirror image of yourself. What you want to do is you want to face toward the boss, or put your back to that column there where I put the X, and then your ad will, then the ads will be pretty stacked, so you're able to AoE them and CC them down pretty quickly. That's really important because those guys can really slap in high keys, especially on Tyrannical, so you want to make that phase as short as possible. A lot of people will save the lust for that phase. I didn't think we really needed to do that in this group, although I would understand if somebody wanted to do that. The reason why I didn't want to do that in this group is because I wanted to maximize the damage on the boss to shorten the length of the fight, to make sure we time. But if you are just having trouble killing the boss, I would say lust on the first phase or the second phase of the ads, because it is the most dangerous part, especially if you're not having any trouble with the dispels. But I think that pretty much covers it. We can wrap up the video here. I know that I went over a lot of stuff, and this was kind of a more serious video. I wasn't very funny, so hope you don't mind too much. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment. Help me start getting this channel off the floor. So far, we've gotten like 14 followers and a couple hundred plays, so that's excellent. But I would love to have, 100 followers and a couple thousand plays. So make sure to share this video if you can. Hopefully it's helpful.
Grading.
And I'll talk to y'all later. Good night, Barry. Farewell. Good morning. Bye.